Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Curious is Better podcast. I'm Craig Lamb with Invative. Today with me, I have Barry Hale from Expedite All. Thanks for joining, Barry. Appreciate it very
Absolutely.
much.
Yep.
Why don't we jump right in? Why don't you tell the listeners about you and what Expedite All does, what you're into? Of
Sure. Thanks for having me on.
course.
Yeah, Expedite All, where we've got the nation's largest, non-asset based, nation's largest small truck fleet. Sprinter vans, cargo vans, straight trucks. We're all in. Got about 12,000 of them in our network. We're highly service focused, not just on the transit time, on the customer facing side of customers of service. You'll find us pushing information to our customers, letting them know what's going on. They're not asking us what's happening. We're telling them what's going on.
Yeah.
Very proactive, very customer centric with our customer service.
Thanks. Hey, listen, I want to recycle some of the stuff you and I have spoken in the past. So I want to recycle some of the stuff that we talked about. You had made a comment to me too, is that tech in general, it has to work for me, the proverbial me. And when you say me, you and your customers, things like that. And then, but I wanted to make sure you were able to explain maybe further about your philosophy on that, and then maybe cite some stuff where that is in the reality for Expedite All. It's like you're either working with a trajectory or a curve for tech.
Yeah, for me personally, I mean, I don't want to be a slave to technology. I don't want to be a poster of information, a repository of posting things that have, at the end of the day, no impact on what happens. Where we move freight, we move we move shipments. That's what we do.
Mhm.
Where now if I can find technology that'll help me get more granular with my clients per se, something that's meaningful, something that customers find value in when I bring it to them, trends of their business, any types of anomalies that we see, repetitive anomalies, any of those types of things that technology can push to me, I'm all in. I just don't find technology as the be all end all to the logistics world.
Yeah, for sure. Again, some of the conversations that you and I had in the past when we were talking about the different tech that we were working on is that you're saying like, tech in general is either viewed or in reality is black or white, right? It's binary. True, false, yes, no, white or black, it's right or wrong, whatever. But in logistics in general, there's a lot of gray area and there's a lot of hand holding with clients, and there's a lot of there's a social thread, right? Of
Hmm.
like trust and stuff that doesn't translate from tech, right? So
Exactly.
you and I were talking too, is like because you've seen a lot, right? You've gone from just handshakes to spreadsheets, to dashboards. Now we're constantly talking about AI and stuff like
Yep.
that. Where do you see in the industry as far as where tech is not really going to offer a hand in those areas of gray? Examples of it.
The as much as we try to make, I find that I back up a little. Greg. I think there's been a little bit of just IP drain in the logistics space.
Mm.
Certainly from the time that I joined this industry, people are really smart. They've been to school. They had been to tariff school. They've been to all these schools and lots of experience. A lot of times with the same company, but lots of experience. And over the years, those guys have been thrown out, right? So as they've been thrown out, you find that uh, they also were the keepers a lot of time of the knowledge base, which made things black or white. We can do this. We can't do this. Irrespective of that, there's always been this gray area in the middle. The little gray area is where this business lives. And you can't hide behind tech and play in the gray area. Gray area is where experience lives. Gray area is where relationships with your clients live. Gray area has some give and take in there, which is anything but black and white. Right? So I think we've become, as an industry, more focused on the black and white, and we've left the gray alone. I think maybe to some extent hoping that tech will solve the gray.
Well, see, and again, this is where you and I, you're like, no, and you might be right. Is that when we talked about, meeting your customers, picking up the phone, talking to a human. We've talked about that, and I agree.
100%.
You and I agree on a bunch. But a lot of the stuff that at least Invaders been working on too is like AI assistants, like true AI assistants, not chatbots and stuff, but like internal facing, external facing, where that tribal knowledge you just talked about, right? That's not just logistics. That's everywhere. They see
It is.
some of the most experienced people aging out, retiring out, or leaving the industry, and they take with them like this curated all of information and knowledge of process and all this stuff that just goes. And how do you disseminate that to the next generation of employees? So, and I guess I never asked. I'm just saying it like I know what I'm talking about. But like, do you see where AI assistants or AI chats could help with that gray, or do you think it's
I
still just too nebulous?
There's a lot of nebulous in there, Craig, but I do see, I really do see AI being a big help on entry type function. I think, bill of completion, quoting functions, we use some quoting, we use some AI, which we
Sure.
have quoting options with at Expedite All, cut down on keystrokes, make your life easier.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Billing functions, collection efforts, different things like that. I think AI definitely has a place. I do.
Yeah. But you're kind of drawing the line too, is like where it's human touch isn't really expected, right? That's kind of like the tenets of business. Here's a bill. Bill needs to be paid. You got to follow up on a bill. You have to enter this, you know, into a system, transcribe it, and again, I was like, yeah, because I like to hear other opinions versus my own. Where it's like even internally, I'll give you an example. Internally for us, it's like when we do estimates, we still have engineers. They use their past projects, they document them. We use other projects. We look outside to competitive bids to see like on RFPs that we may have won or lost, and try to consolidate these things to come up to give some credence to how our estimating works to make sure that we're industry fair and we're comprehensive. However, I'm of the opinion that we could use AI too, is to even challenge some of the things that we've already set up as what we're considering like those guardrails, because maybe the guardrails moved and we didn't know.
It happens. And I think those guardrails move now more than ever. I really do. I mean, nothing is really static in this economy for sure, and in this industry. It's anything but static. And I think the ability, if I had some AI capability to maybe take some trends, build some trends, maybe reinforce some market trends,
Hmm.
try to predict, because you really need to stay 45, 60 days ahead of trends,
Yeah, for sure.
ahead of what's happening.
Yeah, otherwise you're just reporting on history.
You report on history, and
Yeah.
you never catch up. You need to be, a terrible analogy probably is, my granddad used to tell me you never kill a squirrel in the tree you're standing under. If you're going to hunt a patch of woods, you better be looking at the tree down here at the end, because that that's in the tree that you're standing, he knows you're there, and you're not going to shoot him, right? So you got to be out ahead. You got to be out ahead,
Yeah.
and I do employ technology where I can to try and anticipate where the market may be going.
What about other tools? Are your clients asking you about Expedite All and like what you're using for tech that's going to be available to them to work with you? Right. Because there's everybody still has a web interface to be able to engage.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So are they asking for tools? Is that coming up in
Yeah,
conversation?
yes, and we have really good tools at Expedite. Our portal, our booking and load visibility board, everything's built in house. It's state of the art. What I like about what we do at Expedite All, you don't have to have a PhD to interpret it. Very user friendly. It's very practical. There's no fluff, not this magical button up there, pin button that you got to push, and I don't know what that does. It's going to
Well,
tell
and
you for
that's
multiple.
become kind of like the expected norm. Like that's the baseline, right? That's the floor. It's like you
Yeah,
have to have a portal, you have to have features of functions, not just logistics, but like pick an industry, right? There's
yeah,
going to be some interaction functionality that's just anticipated and expected. But I always when I have these conversations with other people and even clients that come to talk to us, it's like it's always interesting to me where their client outreach is in the bell curve. Like the early adopters to the late ones.
mhm,
We're like, well, let's wait and see how things pan out because a lot of our requests are the catalyst for the requests that we get from our clients are from their clients. You know what I
exactly.
mean? What I
Yep.
mean?
No, Craig, I think right now, this AI is the absolute wild, wild west of technology. It's crazy. It's everywhere,
Yeah.
right? I think you'll see things that you and I aren't even thinking about probably become the norm. I think there'll be a
Mhm.
ton of consolidation in the space. If I was going to invest in one, maybe going public, I don't know who, but I think there'll be some huge consolidation
Oh,
moving.
you mean in logistics,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at the end, I would guess, and this is just a guess, but that technology in the AI space is probably growing obsolete in 5 or 6 months now, if not sooner. It's just evolving so fast.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be some accelerated, disruption along the way continues to evolve.
Yeah, I'd agree with you because, and I also think it's kind of like we're still in that experimental phase where it's like, let's try this and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And with something that's less exposing, right? Because if you screw up a client, like how many scripts do you get before you lose a client? One, maybe two if they love you. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and Craig, it's so hard to get business. It's business has never been a cakewalk, but it's really tough these days. And
Yeah.
I find myself, I don't know, the last 15 years or so, waiting on tech more than I'm waiting on the client,
Yeah.
internal tech or the customer's tech.
Sure. Well,
And then
you had
go
said
ahead.
to me, because I want you to expand on this. So like one of the things that you had said to me that really resonated with me, I was like, holy crap, he's right. He's like, what happened back in the days where maybe your grandfather said it to you or somebody said, you got to let clients buy from you. Like open up the back of your truck, let them come up and buy. Like
You do,
you
you know,
can't create obstacles for your customers.
no, it's, I was um, sitting in the South Tower, the World Trade Center,
Mhm.
probably, I don't know, I was probably 34 or 5 years old. And my boss had promoted me to corporate sales, and first territory I had was New York City. I didn't even know enough about the business to ask what my territory was going to be. I'd get these 6 months worth of paper plane tickets, origin DFW airport, destination LGA. I didn't know what LGA was. Looked it up and going to look. And I remember calling him on the phone. I said, me of all people, you're going to send me to New York City to work. At that time in my life, I think I had been on an airplane once, had never been in a taxi cab, never been on in a train, had never really been in a super high rise building, not nothing.
Now you're at 120 stories up.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the Statue of Liberty across New York Harbor, which is not all bad to look at, right?
Yeah. Okay.
But he also told me, there's 6 months worth of job security. If you don't have something going up there by the end of that 6 months, those plane tickets, you might be doing something else. I remember calling him on the phone, first cell phone I had, big giant phone. My granddad was a farmer. I think he went to the 6th grade, and I'm telling him, what's going on, and he's like, best sales advice I ever got. He tells me, he said, the Schwann's truck, you know what the Schwann's truck is, comes out to rural areas, once a month. Schwann's gals show up on your farm, and he's got frozen all kinds of stuff on there. And he said, when the Schwann's truck shows up and he comes out, he tells you what he's got for what's on special, what he's got on the truck this month that he didn't have on there last month. He said, I don't pay any attention to that. He said, but when he opens the doors and moves out of the way and lets me look at what's in the back of the truck, he said, then I'm in business. He said, so maybe you need to quit trying to sell those folks in New York City something and just get out of the way, open the door, and let them buy from you.
I think that's really good advice.
That's the best sales advice I ever got.
It's kind of lost, right? It's kind of lost. It's
Yeah.
that, and that's the thing too, is like, well, because I'm a tech nerd, I work at an engineering company. So we're always like, tech can help, tech can help, tech can help. Sometimes it can. And there's that nuanced stuff about those relationships. So ultimately, your business and mine, there's many things that are similar, but one thing's for sure, that new client relationship is completely 100% built on trust. They want to be able to say, I'm picking Expedite Hall because I saw Barry. I shook his hand, I looked him in the eye. Someone referred, so he's a great guy, and that's where you get your shot. And then tech can back you up, and it can say, help you execute on your promise. But prior to that, it's like that art of the deal, if you will, I don't know what else to call it. I think is something that is
It
lost.
is. It is. I think it gets lost more and more every day. Correct. Um, I think a lot of people, a lot of sales reps, they teach their customer how to treat their company. I mean, that's however you get business is how you got to keep it. Whatever strategy you employ to make a sale, you better saddle up with that strategy because that's what you're going to ride with.
Mm-hmm.
And so many, I just see so many mistakes in that regard, all based around speed to close. I've always been a huge proponent of tempo. Everything has tempo.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
If you're throwing a fly rod, you got tempo, back cast forward, everything's got tempo, right? And the corporate world has misconstrued fast results at the mercy of no regard for tempo.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's a dying art in keeping things in tempo. Yeah, I would like to drive up. Heck, I'd like to drive up to a drive-in window at the drive-in and order, some business. It just doesn't work like that. You're at the mercy of the time and tempo. You have to manage that.
I want to bring it back to a conversation you and I had earlier too that made me think. And we were talking about tech and tempo to buy, trust built to buy, why buy from Expedite and Expedite all. And, you know, we were talking about how, at least in your field, it happens in mine, but my cost cutting or rate cutting is mostly offshore engineers, not so much onshore. Like US engineers are legit US engineer firm. Our rates are pretty close. What you had said
Mhm.
too is that in logistics, I think, correct me if I'm telling your story wrong, but it's like everybody's worried about just cutting costs to win these bids. But then the customers end up paying what the ends up either being a damage, rework, reroutes, whatever. You,
You know, things get tight, the world gets tight. Things get tight. Most of the time in a manufacturing environment, first things people take out of their cost to save cost is packaging.
yeah,
Packaging integrity, then it starts a vicious circle. How does it load? How does it ride? What's susceptibility to damage? What's the cost of a dissatisfied customer, a rework, a reship, a credit? And you can't measure the aggravation. Even AI can't measure the aggravation factor that those types of mistakes cause.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, because when all the mistakes happen, someone wants to throw up the choke, a real one.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And in the world of the unempowered salesperson, that choking gets pretty vicious because not
yeah, for
only
sure.
do you really are you most of the time not an expert in the product you're selling, you really can't handle an adverse situation in that arena.
Another topic I wanted to touch on because you've been in the sales business for such a long time, and you and I spoke about this. Is like I can't tell you the last time I answered an unidentified phone call, right, or anything that was perceived as spam. In fact, I'm probably rude to someone who just cold calls now. I don't know why, but I think I might be if I were really to be self-reflective. So it's kind of like an email first or a text first business environment across lots of industries, right? How do you see that trend affecting the people that you train underneath you or your team or you? And do you see a shift in behaviors or ways to communicate? Because we're using technical channels now to break the ice. Like even you and I, like our first communications were emails. We talked on the phone, and stuff like that, but our very first ones were emails. And then what do you see as far as like the trends for that stuff?
Shame, is what I see. The inability to really react to do business. I see it at my level more than I would like. I was talking to an owner of a company the other day. I finally just went around and got to the owner of the company, and I said, you got salespeople, right? Of course they do. And I said, what if your salespeople have met as much adversity as I've met, just trying to get in front of somebody here? I'm not playing. I've got a product that you need. You need it. What happens to your company if your salespeople can't make contact? We all know the answer to that question,
For sure. But did
right?
they actually respond or what did they treat it rhetorically?
Yeah, it was a reflective look at this, or
Yeah.
a reflective look is what it was. But there's to a certain extent, Craig, that there's I think I've saved one fortune cookie in 40 years of eating Chinese food, right? One fortune cookie. And you know
Lay it
what it
on.
said?
Lay it
It
on.
said, if you work seriously, you will succeed. And I find a lot of the people go to work. My heavens, are probably working more hours now, hanging their hat on whew, I'm 60 hours and it's only Wednesday. I'm 60 hours into the week, right? Well, truth be told, you're working at work. Send an email, no response. Making a phone call, leave a message, no response. Send a text message, no response. Well, let's keep using that same model and call ourselves successful. Doesn't
Yeah.
work. It doesn't work. Customers on the customer side of that, I think they sell themselves short by not really getting to know their salespeople.
Yeah. Well, I'd argue this though, Barry. I think a lot of people are thinking now because of how accessible information is that they liken themselves smarter than whatever the expert is. And so your product that you're pitching, that product better than anybody. But I think that clients, because I face it too, right? So clients will be like, no, I can educate myself. And I've decided without talking to Barry or, hearing his side of the story that this product or opportunity falls short here, here, or here. And, it's often untrue where people want to be armed with at least the idea that they can educate themselves without help. And that's what I was arguing with you, not arguing, but debating you about. It's
Right.
like maybe tech, that's the opportunity, is like to present them with the stuff that they don't know, the ahas. I don't know, but
sometimes that works. That does work. You know, if if you can pair rank like businesses, because they all know who their competitors are, right?
Sure.
Here's what these guys do with us. Here's what you do. Here's how quick they pay their bills. Here you are. What's up? You know, what's up? And that gets people, when you start to stack people up with their peers. That's when the axe hits the grindstone.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. Well, listen, Barry, it's been great talking to you. I appreciate you being on the podcast today. I think these are some really interesting topics. I think people are going to really enjoy your insights. I appreciate you coming. I can't tell you, I am looking forward to talking to you again real soon about
Thanks, Craig.
fishing.
You
And
bet.
thanks again, Barry.
You bet.